In today's video, we're discussing a proposed blockbuster deal between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the New York Rangers. Plus, we're going to discuss some other ways the Leafs might be able to become cap compliant before the start of the season. Also, in Toronto, they've extended head coach Sheldon Keefe on a multi-year contract extension. We also have news on former NHL coach Bill Peters, several PTOs announced as well. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot of NHL news to discuss tonight. First up, we do have another longtime player announcing his retirement. It's kind of been the trend here lately. Lots of players getting these announcements out here in recent days. But now we've learned that longtime NHL forward Carl Hagelin is going to be retiring. Of course, a two-time Stanley Cup champion, has played 713 games in his career, putting up just shy of 300 points. All kinds of playoff experience and obviously lots of success winning 2 Stanley Cups. Played with a variety of teams as well. Mostly probably known for his time with the Rangers and Penguins and Capitals. Spent a lot of time in the Metro Division, a little bit of time out west in California as well. But Hagelin certainly had his fair share of injuries, which is probably fair to say had an impact on shortening his career, but did have a lot of success. Terrific skater, lots of speed, and certainly would like to wish him the best in retirement. On to some other news. This news to me was a little bit somewhat surprising, and I'm sure there's probably going to be a variety of opinions out there, but former NHL coach Bill Peters, who many of you may remember, who's been gone from the league now for quite a bit of time after losing his job in Calgary after it was revealed about the whole incident between him and Akim Aliu, which happened prior to his time in Calgary when they were both in the Blackhawks organization due to some racially motivated language used towards Aliu. Of course, Bill Peters ended up leaving the Flames and has been out of the NHL for quite a period of time now. And of course, I think it's been 5. I think it's going on 6 years now since he lost his job in Calgary, or I guess he resigned, but essentially he was kind of forced to resign based on the situation. Has now been hired in the Western Hockey League by the Lethbridge Hurricanes. So of course he coached junior before he ever made it to the NHL. And he's going back to his junior roots to begin coaching again. Now, this news broke with like I said, a lot of opinions attached to it, and I can understand why. Certainly, the big issue here is that Bill Peters has never really apologized to Akim Aliu. That whole situation became, obviously it happened a number of years before it became public, and then since it became public, obviously there's a lot of ramifications from it. But Peters apparently has never apologized to Aliu. Recently, in the last week or so, Akim Aliu has confirmed that Bill Peters, through the help of another NHL head coach, and he did not name the other NHL coach, tried to get through to Aliu via third party, or kind of trying to broker an apology, if you will, which seemed kind of random out of the blue after all these years. All the other coach was looking to do was trying to get the two in touch, and Akim Aliu told the other coach, quite frankly, I have a lot of respect for you. I've heard a lot of good things about you, but I really at this point don't really have any interest in talking to Bill anymore. Basically, if Bill Peters wants to apologize, he should be going about this himself, not through a third party. And now here we are with him getting named as a head coach in junior just a short time after. It's kind of the same situation we've seen with other people in the hockey world trying to make amends because an opportunity came up, right? I don't know. I personally do believe in second chances. I do think people make mistakes, and if they've paid their dues and they've paid their price, then I think that a second chance can be justified. In his case, though, it baffles me that this team would want to go through the process of hiring him, face all the backlash PR-wise, and knowing that he's never actually, properly apologized to Aliu. That's the part that gets me. But at the end of the day, that he is now going to be employed as a head coach. I'm sure they're going to feel pressure here by the public to maybe change their minds. I don't know if anything will come from that. I just would like to see, people if they make mistakes that cost them, look at like Jim Montgomery for a prime example. There was a stretch of time there where there was coaches obviously like between Peters and then the whole other thing in Chicago involving Kyle Beach. Like a lot of people have lost their jobs. We saw Jim Montgomery when he was a head coach of the Dallas Stars suddenly be let go for personal reasons with cause. Obviously Montgomery took ownership of his mistakes and went to rehab, got himself corrected. Different scenario in a sense, but still, like, he went through the proper channels and proper steps to change his life for the better, and has now gotten a second chance in Boston. Those are good stories. I like to see people kind of bounce back and rehabilitate themselves, but I don't know that he has. But anyway, so controversial hiring in the Western Hockey League. I'd love to know what you think about their decision in the comments. Several other PTOs were announced today as well, including 3 in Pittsburgh. The Pittsburgh Penguins are inviting a couple of defensemen, including youngster Libor Hayek, former New York Ranger, who was not qualified and has not signed on anywhere else. So he's going to Pittsburgh on a PTO. Veteran Mark Pysyk as well is going on a PTO, as well as former LA King Austin Wagner. The Dallas Stars are also bringing back Jordie Benn, of course, who was in the organization before and most recently played with the Toronto organization, mostly with the Marlies and the AHL. Will go to Dallas training camp also on a PTO. And then we also learned today that 2022 first rounder of the Buffalo Sabres, Noah Östlund, is going to be playing in Sweden this year, going to the SHL, and is going to be playing, I believe, with the league champion Vaxo Lakers. So certainly good development opportunity for Östlund, who's at this point wouldn't be expected to make the Sabres NHL roster. Big news out of Toronto today as well. Brad Treliving, the GM of the Leafs, have announced that they've extended head coach Sheldon Keefe. This I kind of caught by surprise, because after the Matthews signing, he did address questions from the media, talked about Keefe, of course, because he was in the final year of his deal, talked about Nylander and any other business that reporters wanted to ask about. And when it came to Sheldon Keefe, I really got the impression that there was no rush, there was no hurry, that he was impressed, he said, with what he had seen and heard of Keefe so far during their interactions throughout the offseason. But it sounded like that they were kind of start the season and kind of just see where it goes before a decision was made. That's the impression I had based on his choice of words that day. That was not long ago, but here we are. Of course, he said that, Sheldon Keefe, he thinks of him as a really good coach. And when you have really good people in your organization, you do what you can to retain them. And I don't disagree with that at all. I just thought after all the changes we've seen, and obviously the change in management, with him obviously taking over the job, and a fair bit of player personnel change as well, that they might want to see how things go. But like I said before, when I talked about Keefe, I wondered how this was going to go, because in the last while, since the Leafs have gone through their rebuild, if you go back to the last 5-6 years now, like, they've been a really good regular season team. That has not been the problem for the Leafs. For them to be a top 3 team and make the playoffs and qualify, like, that has not been an issue for them. Their issue is getting over the hump in the playoffs. They've gone into the playoffs and all 3 of the different spots in the top 3, whether they've had home ice or not. They finally won a round last year, but then had a really bad round 2 and lost out. So clearly they want to take the next step. And, obviously, the coach is, like everybody else, under scrutiny. So I can understand why they would want to keep him. I can understand why they might go the other direction and just kind of wait and see. But like I said, if they're going to want to wait, and like sometimes when the coach is on the hot seat, you want to see, okay, we'll let them start the season, 20-25 games in. If things aren't going well, we're making a change. But that's probably not going to make sense for the Leafs. It's either you need to give them the whole year, because you're not going to know how it's going to go until they get to the playoffs. That's where either the failure or the magic is going to happen. And you want to see the magic more than the failure. And, at that point, he'd be on an expiring contract. You could give him the year and let him ride it out, or do you extend him? The other thing you have to look at, too, when it comes to coaches is there really a clear-cut, better opportunity to hire somebody else you think could be a better person for this job right now? And if the answer is no, then you might as well stick put. So he did get a multi-year extension. He'll now be under contract till the end of the 25-26 season. So he can get through this year and another year. before he's even going to, contemplate extending again or what have you. I guess we'll see. I still really think, though, this tells me, though, that regardless of how things go this year, unless it's horribly bad, which I don't expect, that even if they don't have the playoff success they're hoping for, that he's probably going to survive another year. At least that would be my guess. You wouldn't want to see him sign to a multi-year extension when he was going into the final year of his deal, and then let's say they win around and fail in round 2 again or something. Like, why would you fire him at that point? You would just extended him, and you just got then, saying that this is not all his fault. So ultimately, we'll see what happens. But I do think he's a good coach. I do think he's a good fit in Toronto. Clearly, he and the players have developed a good bond. Lots of turnover, though, in the roster, so I'll be curious to see how the new pieces fit in Toronto. That's going to be probably the biggest question, and we'll see how Sheldon makes out. Now, we're going to stick with the Leafs here and talk about some trade scenarios. One, we know that the Leafs are going to be required to make a move of some sort before the start of the year because they're over the cap. Now, they're over the cap by a lot, but they do have some LTIR money that they can use. So they're over the LTIR portion of what they can use by about just shy of $3 million. It's 2.9 and change. And I've seen a lot of people make the comment or the suggestion online through social media that the easy solution here is to trade Calle Järnkrok. Now, Järnkrok signed an extension at $2.1 million. There's a couple of years left on that. And I see some people saying, well, you shouldn't trade Järnkrok. He's a 20-goal scorer. He's valuable. And I get that. But you got to remember, Järnkrok became a 20-goal scorer, became valuable because of who he played with last year. I honestly do believe that he's a good player. I do think he does bring some value. I don't think he's not I don't think he's at a point where he's not replaceable, though. I think you can replace Calle Järnkrok, and you could probably replace him and give more ice time even to a guy like a Matthew Knies, for example. You still have William Nylander. I mean, we don't know the future of him right now beyond the current season, and we're going to talk about him here in a minute. But you still got Nylander and Marner as your top two wingers, right? You brought in Bertuzzi, you brought in Domi. That's the four wingers that are going to play in your top six. So, is Järnkrok going to get the same opportunity that he did last year? Or is he going to be more of a third-line player, playing with different players, likely going to see a drop in his production? I think this could be a prime opportunity for the Leafs to sell high on Järnkrok and to move out that contract. Because the other thing they went down, he makes 2.1. They're 2.9 and change over, but they also have 3 goalies on the roster. One's going to have to go through waivers and to go to the Marlies, which would be Martin Jones. Put him through waivers. Either he gets nabbed by another team or he goes to the Marlies. Either way, his contract is not counting against the cap anymore. And then Järnkrok, you trade him for some sort of future-based prospect or pick or something, and boom, you're cap compliant. So to me, that is what makes sense. I don't know how high of a pick you can get for Järnkrok or how high of a prospect, but to me, it makes a lot of sense. Now, we'll see what they do. But I know the article that we looked at in yesterday's video, which was written by it was collaboration by I think it was 3 or 4 different authors who write for thescore.com, and they had multiple trades that they felt were players, at least, that were likely to be dealt either before the season or early in the season, and they went through and kind of drafted up what they felt were reasonable trade proposals, and each writer had to say, who says no to this? So, was one team say no? Does the other team say no? Is it a good deal that it's probably going to go through? How do you feel about it? And we talked about some of those things. We looked at 3 different scenarios. I think there was about 6 or 7 in the article. We looked at a proposal for Noah Hannafin, for Elias Lindholm, and for Mark Scheifele yesterday. Now, there was a big one in there, and I figured I'd do this one on its own because it's kind of complex, but they did propose a blockbuster trade between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the New York Rangers involving William Nylander. Now, of course, this gets complicated, and I'm going to show you the proposal. We know that Nylander's been mentioned in the rumor mill because of the lack of contract extension for a while, and it's probably going to continue to do that until he signs or he gets dealt. It's just that simple. It's going to happen. But here's a proposal. Let me know, who do you think says no to this trade, or do you think it's reasonable enough that if the teams had this discussion that they would decide to pull the trigger? Going to the New York Rangers from the Toronto Maple Leafs would include William Nylander, of course, with a contract extension on a 7-year deal, making at least $9.5 million. Along with William Nylander would be defenseman Timothy Liljegren, forwards Calle Järnkrok and Pontus Holmberg. So 4 players going from Toronto to the Rangers. In exchange, the Leafs get a younger centerman Filip Chytil, young winger Kaapo Kakko, young defenseman Braden Schneider, and forward Barclay Goodrow, who's a veteran and Stanley Cup champion, with 20% of his contract retained. So that's a 4-for-4 deal. I personally don't think that this trade would happen as is. I think there's a good chance you could probably pare it down a little bit. At best, I think if you take out Goodrow, because I don't think Toronto would like that contract, even with a little bit of money retained. So take Barclay Goodrow out of the question and take Holmberg out of the question for Toronto, make it down to like a 3-for-3. It would be more likely. I'm still not sure it happens. In the Leafs case, obviously you trade a player, Nylander, who you really like, but can't come to terms on a contract. You got Järnkrok, who I said, serviceable middle 6 player, ideally 3rd-line guy, but it's not like he can't replace players like that. But yes, he is a good player. But again, would you take a Filip Chytil or a Kaapo Kakko to put in the lineup? You probably would. I mean, Liljegren, you like him too, but you probably like Braden Schneider better. So to me, Schneider's an upgrade on Liljegren. And if you're looking at Nylander and Järnkrok, well, neither one of them is going to, between Chytil and Kakko, neither one of them are going to give you, at least not initially, what Nylander did, but you're not expecting that either. They're also making a lot less money. You have players in Kakko that's, a high pick who's still trying to fulfill his potential. I don't know. To be honest, I think in this case, I do wonder if the Leafs pull the trigger. I mean, parts of this deal I think they would like. I don't think they'd like the Goodrow contract, and I don't know. I think they would like Schneider over Liljegren, but when you look at Nylander and Järnkrok for Chytil and Kakko, it's not. I mean, Chytil and Kakko would probably be like I think somebody they'd like over Järnkrok, but when you're giving up Nylander, you're not necessarily getting, you're not getting a 1st-round pick back. You're not getting somebody with higher ceiling. Like Chytil and Kakko, to me, I even Lafreniere for that matter, in the Rangers, like I'm starting to wonder what their ceilings are, and they're still young. So maybe we'll see a big upswing here and maybe we'll turn out to be wrong. But it does make you wonder, would the Leafs actually pull the trigger on this? I don't know. And even for the Rangers, as much as they might like William Nylander, think about this for a minute. I mean, where's Nylander going to fit on that team? I mean, obviously he's a little bit younger than some of their wingers. Like obviously they've got Artemi Panarin, you've got Chris Kreider. Like where are you going to slot Nylander in that lineup? Is he going to be a 1st-line player? Would he be a 2nd-line player? That's a lot of money on some contracts there. It'd be tough for them to work that out because obviously if you're paying Nylander close to $10 million and you're not moving out, that's why the Goodrow contract would almost have to be included. It just gets really complicated here. So personally, I don't think this deal would actually happen as is. But I do think the Rangers might be a player. Like I said, if the Leafs make it public knowledge that Nylander is, likely going to be dealt because he's not going to be signed, there's going to be a lot of teams lining up and there'll be a lot of teams making proposals. But I honestly do wonder where he could end up. I think there's probably better teams with a better fit and better return for Toronto. Like I mentioned before, I think the Ducks make a ton of sense. I really like Carolina as a destination for Nylander should he get moved. The Rangers, I don't know. They've already got a lot of big-time talent there, some big contracts, and it's questionable for sure. So to me, I don't know. I think the Leafs probably don't do this deal. I honestly wonder, do the Rangers do this deal? Is it possible both teams reject the offer? It's hard to say. I'm going to say it's a possibility that neither team would be absolutely in love with the trade. But I'd love to know what you guys think down in the comments down below. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.